I have not violated any law.
A black man arrived at the airport early, dressed professionally, passport in hand. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't doing anything wrong. But within minutes, an airport cop decided he didn't belong. Cold metal snapped around his wrists, not because of a crime, but because of how he looked. What happened next forced everyone watching to confront an ugly American truth. Marcus Reed had built his life on preparation. As a logistics consultant based in Chicago, precision was his world: schedules, systems, outcomes. Airports were familiar territory. He knew the rhythms, the rules, the unspoken expectations. This morning was no different. A business trip to Denver, a presentation he'd refined for weeks, a timeline that left no room for mistakes. Marcus moved through the terminal calmly, aware but relaxed, confident in the routine he'd followed dozens of times before. He dressed carefully, not out of vanity, but habit. Experience had taught him that presentation mattered, especially in public, spaces where assumptions formed quickly. His documents were ready, his movements deliberate. Nothing about him stood out except his skin. Marcus noticed the first stare near the security area, then another. Subtle, lingering, unnecessary. He ignored it, as he always did. Airports were stressful places. People watched everyone. But this time, the attention didn't fade. As Marcus approached his gate, a uniformed airport police officer slowed nearby. The presence felt deliberate, calculated. Marcus adjusted his bag and kept walking, unaware that a decision had already been made. One rooted not in evidence, but perception. In a place designed to protect travelers, Marcus was about to learn how easily protection could turn into suspicion. The stop came without urgency, but with authority. Marcus complied immediately, offering identification without hesitation. His posture remained calm, his breathing controlled. Years of navigating similar moments had taught him one lesson above all. Remain still, remain respectful, remain alive. The officer examined his documents longer than necessary. Another officer joined. Then another. The circle tightened. No clear explanation followed, only vague concerns, shifting justifications, and glances that carried more judgment than caution. Marcus felt the familiar tension settle in his chest, the kind that didn't come from fear alone, but from recognition. He had seen this pattern before, on screens, in headlines and other people's stories. He had just never expected to become the image himself. The escalation was sudden. His arms were pulled back. Metal closed around his wrists. The sound cut sharply through the terminal, louder than it should have been. Conversations nearby faltered. Footsteps slowed. Eyes fixed. A black man in handcuffs at an airport needed no explanation for some people. The assumption filled the silence. Marcus didn't resist. He didn't raise his voice. He stood still as he was escorted through public corridors, past families, business travelers, and strangers who would remember his face far longer than they remembered the reason. Phones appeared openly now. The quiet compliance that authority often relied on began to crack. The image was too clear, too uncomfortable. Behind the scenes, systems moved quickly. Databases checked, names verified, records confirmed what Marcus had known all along. He was exactly who he said he was. No alerts, no warrants, no threat. What remained was not a security issue, but a liability. Supervisors arrived. Energy shifted. Confidence drained from the room. The certainty that had justified everything moments earlier evaporated under scrutiny. Marcus stood restrained as truth caught up to assumption. And once it did, there was no way to undo what had already been seen. The handcuffs were removed quietly. No announcement. No correction loud enough to reach the people who had watched it unfold. Authority retreated as discreetly as it had advanced. Marcus remained standing, wrists marked, suit creased, dignity bruised. Around him, passengers stared openly now, not with suspicion but realization. The narrative they had been offered had collapsed. This wasn't about safety. It never was. Supervisors spoke in low tones. Procedures were cited. Regret was implied but not owned. What had happened was framed as caution rather than bias, as protocol rather than prejudice. But Marcus understood the truth clearly. In a space governed by rules, he had been judged without evidence. In a system built on order, chaos had been directed at him personally. And in a country that claimed progress, an old pattern had played out effortlessly. What shocked everyone wasn't just that it happened, but how quickly it happened. How naturally suspicion replaced neutrality. How easily power moved when guided by assumption. Marcus wasn't angry in that moment. He was exhausted, because this wasn't extraordinary. It was familiar. Marcus boarded a later flight that day. He delivered his presentation. He shook hands. He fulfilled every obligation that had brought him to the airport, in the first place. But the experience followed him. Footage from the terminal spread online. Viewers reacted sharply. Some questioned the officer's actions. Others defended them instinctively. The divide was immediate and revealing. Marcus chose to speak about what happened, not to provoke outrage, but to expose reality. He described the silence, the restraint, the weight of being publicly reduced to a stereotype. He spoke calmly, deliberately, refusing to soften the truth for comfort. His story resonated because it wasn't extreme. It was believable. That was the most unsettling part. This wasn't about one officer or one airport. It was about how bias slipped quietly into systems that claimed objectivity, about how authority, when unchecked, could humiliate without consequence, and about how many similar moments ended without cameras, witnesses, or accountability. Marcus walked away free, but changed. And so were the people who watched his story unfold. The question isn't whether this incident was wrong. The question is how many times it's already happened, when no one was recording.